again, there's another interesting story about Phoenix. My grandmother, her family is a Tibshrani from Biskinta, Lebanon. And a lot of the people in Phoenix were Tibshranis, in fact. And some of them my grandfather actually brought over. And he was in Biskinta, Lebanon is up in the northern part of Lebanon. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. The best cherries and the best trout. And there's a monastery there, St. Michael's. In any case, one day I started rummaging around the attic and I came across this package. It was all wrapped up. So I began tearing the paper. And what was it? It was an icon of Saint Antony the Great, painted by my grandmother's cousin, who was a nun in Beirut, in called Notre Dame, the presentation of the Virgin Mary. And I picked at the icon, I brought it down, and I saw her name on the bottom, Beleja Tibshrani. And one of the parishioners, Nelly Saliba, said that my relatives were in Phoenix visiting their relatives and some years before, and somehow she knew I was going there to be the priest, and she wrote this icon of Saint Antony, and it was left in the attic for some reason. I don't know why, but it was left there until I found it. It's been in my home ever since 1962. And I went to Lebanon so many times, and I visited my grandmother's relatives, the two nuns. The mother superior is called Mary Jo, and her name was Beleja. She was a award-winning iconographer. And I'm telling you this story because it's about the mystery of human relationships. I mean, how did she know that I was going to be there? How did she even know my name was Antony? That was named by Metropolitan Anthony Bashir, who was named after Saint Anthony the Great of Egypt. It perplexed me almost my whole life how she knew. Even when I tried to question her when I saw her in person, she just knew. And it connected us, two different worlds. It brought us together in a very unique and special way. And I just felt that there was these holy nuns praying for my ministry as a priest. I never saw them. I never knew them. And yet we were brought together by an icon. And the eyes, that icon, by the way, penetrates you. It's like it follows you. Like it's looking at you. And somehow I believe that my dear cousin, somehow intuitively, and this is a point, you know how important intuition is in human relationships? We tend to analyze, intellectualize, justify, whatever, our human relationships. And there's a knowledge that's even deeper than this for me is the essence of Orthodox mystical spirituality. And that intuition plays such an important part in our understanding of God, in understanding of our fellow men and women. When you meet another person, your intuition can often tell you whether this is going to be a good relationship or not. And I think we ought to listen more to our intuition and less about what the book says or what certain holy fathers say that we want to apply to a certain situation. I can't tell you how many times when people came for confession and they have some pretty grave sins, I simply knew what they were going to confess to me about. And I remember one young man saying, well, actually, an older gentleman, an older woman, and a young kid, 3 people right in succession, said to me, I know that you know that you know that I know. And yeah, I knew. And it made it easier for them to open up. Because I was there not as a judge. I was there as a pastor to hopefully heal their wounds, to heal their brokenness. Or what C.S. Lewis says, the bent man, the bent person, that they missed the mark, so to speak. It wasn't my role to be a judge and jury, but rather to heal their wounds. That's why we're called, it even says in the prayer, for thou art the physician of our souls and bodies. And the priestly mission is to emulate the idea of being the physician of the souls and bodies of the people that we encounter, to touch them in the core of their being. Again, I learned these things at a very early age. One time, I decided, because people weren't coming to confession or communion at that time in Phoenix. We're talking about 55 years ago. So one day I decided to put a sombrero on, a poncho and a rocking chair, and I sat in the middle of the church. And I asked the choir director, because we established the choir, that church had been closed when the priest hitchhiked out of town. So I had to do the whole thing, get everything from scratch. Anyway, I told her, just sing the hymns of the liturgy. And I sat in front of the altar, rocking back and forth on the rocking chair. And after sufficient time, I got up and I gave this rousing sermon about waking up from your spiritual slumber. And you all know the TV program MASH. Jamie Farr, his mother was in my church, Jamili Farah. I'll never forget, she came up, she said, I'm glad you told those people. And I looked at her, I said, you know what, we're all those people. Anyway, it was very funny, but again I learned another lesson. That I couldn't judge these people because they didn't have a church for a long time. And they needed someone to teach them all over again. What was their faith? what it meant to be in communion. Now it was a lesson, another lesson. I'm glad I did it because I learned from it. It was funny to everybody in the congregation. They all chuckled about it because there's this young priest trying to teach everybody how to behave. But we can't preach at people. We have to talk to them and let them know that they're all of great value and that the role of the church, in a way, is to elevate their consciousness. So, like Dostoevsky says in Brothers Karamazov, sin is a state of non-godness, that they realize that if they're not participating in the Eucharist, that they're not fully engaged with Christ. But again, you don't teach that by setting down the law. You teach that by example and by love. And knowing that every person counts and how you encounter them, either as the pastor in the congregation, in the context of the congregation, or one-on-one. Compassion. 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 Thank you. God bless.